Out on Canada's west coast, there lies a land of legendary monsters. And in that same fabled land, there is a legend of the lost tribe of the Sasquatch Indians.
The hairy giants of British Columbia. And hard on their trail, here is anthropologist Rene Dahinden, who tells Naira Groves of CJIB that there's more fact than fiction to that legend.
Here in the Okanagan Valley and throughout the beautiful rugged interior of British Columbia, strange tales and Indian legends abound. There's Ogopogo, mysterious monster of Lake Okanagan, the Headless Valley, and the lost Pit Lake gold mine, which has claimed the lives of 21 prospectors in their search for the hidden gold. But a young Swiss mountaineer is on the trail of a story that's stranger than all the rest, a story that may turn out to be more than legend. Rene Dahinden, now of Lumby, BC, 16 miles from Vernon, is hunting the lost tribe of the Sasquatch, BC's hairy giants. Rene, who is 26 years old, is slight of build, brisk of movement, and sports a bristling sandy beard that proclaims his kinship with things anthropological. Rene Dahinden came to Canada from Switzerland in 1953 and spent his first year working on farms in the prairie provinces. But he came with a born sense of adventure, looking for a new, free way of life. It wasn't long before he heard the story that was to send him off on the adventure of his career. But he's here in the studio with me now. Rene, I'd like you to tell us in your own words why you believe the story of the Sasquatch and why you're willing now to spend years, perhaps at the risk of your own life, to find this strange tribe. First of all, what exactly are the Sasquatch? Could you describe BC's hairy giants, or as they're sometimes called, the big men of the mountains?
According to the Indians, the Sasquatch is supposed to be 7 to 8 feet tall, broad-shouldered, with a white face and a flat nose. They got long hair all over the body, no clothes at all. Their arms are reaching quite down below their knees. They walk kind of hunched over, and their footprint were measured up to 22 inches.
Well then, do you believe that they actually do exist?
Yes.
In newspaper stories dealing with your search for the Sasquatch, they've often been compared to the abominable snowmen of the Himalayas. Do you think there's a possibility that if either or both of these tribes exist, they might be the same race of people?
This is hard to say, but it could be the possibility.
How did you first come to hear about the Sasquatch?
I was working at the time in Calgary, and my boss, who was working during the wartime in Vancouver, told me about the Sasquatch. And after questioning him for quite a while, he said, "Why don't you go and look for him?" So I said, "That's just what I'm trying to do."
Well, I'm told that you have amassed a good deal of material or evidence pointing to the existence of BC's hairy giants. What was the earliest record describing what we now call the Sasquatch?
The earliest record was from 1846 and was written by a Hudson Bay Company inspector who was establishing a post near Harrison Lake. Anderson frequently mentioned in his official reports the wild giant of the mountain. Once he wrote, he and his party were met by a bombardment of rocks hurled by a number of Sasquatch. There is also the story of the Harrison Hot Spring Hotel, where in the early 1940 a guest took a walk toward the bush one morning. Between the trees he seen a big hairy man standing. He got frightened and ran back to the hotel, where he told the manager about it. The manager replied, "Oh, that's a Sasquatch." He and a couple of other guests went back to the spot where they seen the giant, but he disappeared on when they came there. And there's the story of Mrs. and Mr. Chapman at Ruby Creek from around 1945 or so. Mr. Chapman was working for the CNR Railroad. One morning he left to work, and Mrs. Chapman and her 2 kids were left at home alone. She had a boy 4-year-old and a baby boy a couple of months old. Toward noon the boy came running in the house and told his mother about the big cow who stepped over the fence and walked toward the woodshed. Mrs. Chapman looked out the window and seen the big hairy man coming toward her house. She took her 2 kids and went out the front door and ran down to the Fraser River and the CNR railroad tracks, where she went in hiding. The giant went into the woodshed, where there was a barrel of salted fish. He didn't like the taste of it and he threw the whole barrel outside. After that he went around the house and went down to the Fraser River where he was shouting across the river. Mrs. Chapman stayed there till her husband came back in the evening. A couple of days later they moved away from the place because she didn't like to stay there any longer. Mr. Burns, who is a well-known authority on the Sasquatch, an Indian school teacher and government agent for 16 years in the Dahinden Indian Reserve, writes in his first article in Maclean's magazine 1929 about them. And in all the other articles he writes, he knows quite a few incidents where the Indian met the Sasquatch face to face. He also says he has known all the time when the Sasquatch were around his schools and his Indian reserve because the Indians didn't let the kids to school because they were afraid they were taken away from. There is also a report of a skeleton found in the interior, measured 7 foot 6 inches. I couldn't find out where it was shipped, but it says it was shipped to a foreign country.
How is it possible for a tribe of people to exist undetected for this number of years, especially in surroundings like the rugged mountains and valleys of British Columbia?
This part of the country is very wild and there is quite a large amount of game to live on. There are brown and black bear, there are some grizzly bears, mountain goats, deers, and all kinds of birds and marmots, roots and berries for the Sasquatch to live on.
What do you think they do in the wintertime?
I couldn't find out what they do in the winter, but I guess they're living in cave and storing some food during the summertime.
What particular part of the country, then, is it thought that the Sasquatch do inhabit or have inhabited in the past?
They were seen around the Okanagan Lake, and they were seen in Merritt, they were seen north of Kamloops, and also some were seen in Williams Lake, but the greatest part of them are in the Chihili Range and around Harrison Hot Spring.
Well, Mrs. Dahinden, what do you think of your husband's chances for success in his expeditions?
Well, I think there is possibility in succeeding. I think there might still be some Sasquatch around quite far in the country maybe, and as they are scared for the white people. So but if he could stay long enough on his research and have help, he would be able to find them.
Well, last summer, Rene, you started out on your first survey of the country where you thought the Sasquatch might be found. Did you have any success in your search then?
No, we didn't see any trace or tracks of the hairy giants, but we were only in 2 months and this is not a long enough time to make any real search for them. We flew in from Harrison Hot Spring to Boots Lake on the border of Garibaldi Park, and from there we went up by boat up the lake, Harrison Lake, and went up to Mount Breckenridge, 7,825 feet high, and further over to the west to mountains who have no name yet. It is quite a wild country with lots of bush and snow down to 3,500 feet even in the middle of the summer, but we didn't find any trace at all.
Well, did you feel that you had enough equipment or the right kind of equipment to carry on a proper search?
No, I don't think we had the right kind of equipment. We need better movie cameras, and especially telephoto lenses and powerful telescope to find them.
Well, now, what are your immediate plans for the future?
Right now I'm trying to get a sponsor for a further expedition. And in the springtime, as soon as the weather permits, I like to go in south of the Princeton Hope Highway and try to make a search in there, and further in the summer north of the Fraser River and up to the Garibaldi Park where the weather are better in the summertime.
About how long do you think it might take you to get some real results in your expeditions?
This is hard to say. It could take a week, a month or a year or even longer, but I'm sure we succeed in finding them.
I'm sure we wish you the very best of luck, Rene, in your search for BC's hairy giants. How much is legend? How much fact? And if some of the hairy giants do exist, what are they? A wild Indian tribe or descendants of Stone Age men? If Rene Dahinden is successful in his hunt for the Sasquatch, it could mean a major scientific discovery of the 20th century. This is Naira Groves of CJIB Vernon reporting back to assignment.
You know, I've got a theory, Naira. Maybe they're the Cyclops' kith and kin. Wouldn't that be a discovery?